I think if you look back at other kind of revolutions, industrial revolution, etc., I think there were similar fears around that time of people losing jobs. But I think what's happened before and what will probably happen again is that these kind of technological breakthroughs lead to more jobs being created, jobs that don't exist now but will exist in the future. And I'd say I'm more optimistic about that. Um, there are people who worry that we're going to end up working for the robots, but I think that kind of undermines and defeats the whole purpose of using them in the first place. Um, and it would give rise to things like potentially a universal basic income and maybe a change in what we see as work, a shift in what we value as a society as well.
My guest this week is Ben Henderson-Palmer, who is a robotics sales and marketing professional. Ben has a bachelor's degree in law from Aberdeen University, and he dotted about a few different jobs before finding his way into STEM. Currently, Ben is the Chief Commercial Officer of Robotical, who make the multi-award winning Marty the robot, who you can see over my shoulder. Ben, welcome to STEM with Mr. N.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's good to be here.
And it's a pleasure to have you on. Can we just start with talking about who are Robotical and what do you do?
Yeah, so Robotical is an educational technology company based in Edinburgh in Scotland. We started back in 2016. Our founder is Dr. Alexander Enoch, who's did his PhD in robotics, and that kind of gave birth to Marty the robot as we know it today. Our mission is to bring learning alive for children from as young as kind of kindergarten level all the way through to 8th grade currently. And we do that with Marty the robot, as you say, through lots of different kind of coding environments and through lots of different lessons that we publish online to cover off different parts of the curriculum.
And on that note, can you tell us a wee bit more about Marty? What can he do?
So yeah, Marty can do a lot. And the more you learn with it, the more you can make it do. At a very early stage, you'll be getting Marty to respond to different colors, and that's your method of kind of coding the robot. And then as you progress, you can start to play around with things like sensors, taking in real world feedback and getting Marty to respond to the world around it. But as you can see kind of from the shape of Marty, it's a humanoid robot. So it's got moving arms, legs, and eyebrows too. So there's like that character human aspect that makes it relatable and engaging for children.
And I have made videos on Marty. I really like him. I think he's a great robot. So I'll put links in the description so that people can check out what he can do from my videos. And I'll link obviously to Robotical's YouTube as well, so they can see that too. So now we know a wee bit about Robotical and Marty. What is your job as Chief Commercial Officer? What does that involve?
Yeah, so kind of in a nutshell, ultimately I'm responsible for the commercial performance of the business. So making sure that we are selling enough of these robots to keep the business operating and keep making a difference. Yeah, I've worked in a kind of sales and commercial role in the business for, I think it might be 5 years this year, maybe 4 years, 4 or 5 years. And my role's kind of changed and developed over that time. So it started off leading up the way that we sell directly to schools, and then started doing more on our kind of distributor partnerships side. And then that's kind of changed and matured and more involved at the kind of strategic level now. And yeah, I'm on the board of directors. So yeah, get to talk about the strategic vision, the long-term goals of the company, as well as kind of making sure the day-to-day is all working as well as it can.
And you've said that Robotical are based in Edinburgh. So is Marty an exclusively UK-based robot, or does Marty have a wider reach?
And yeah, so we've sold Marty kind of all across the world from quite early on. We are based in Scotland, but most of our sales at the moment are in the US. So yeah, interestingly, we're over 50 countries you'll find Marty in schools, most likely in the US. We've also got quite a few in Hong Kong, but of course, with Scotland being our home turf, there's a lot of schools in Scotland who know Marty and have them in the classroom.
And I know you used to do a trial scheme with Marty. Is that still a way that schools can gain access to the robot before actually going ahead and purchasing the units?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's still something that we roll out. Um, yeah, it's when you invest in technology as a school, a lot of schools these days don't have huge budgets. So you want to be very careful with how you spend that. And you want to make sure you've done all of your due diligence and make sure that it's working and having the impact that you want from technology in the school. So the trial kind of gives you a risk-free opportunity to put Marty through its paces and make sure it's the right thing for the teachers and also for the students. And
So
yeah,
we've
it's a two week trial.
a
Yeah.
2 week trial. And how do people gain access to the 2 week trial?
So usually through a link to a free trial request form. From there, they're able to book in a time to speak with us and set a date to kind of kickstart the whole thing. We provide free training to start that. Um, you've got a link, I think, that we've shared with you in the past. So I don't know if it's possible to put that down in the description. And if anyone wants to get Marty to visit their school, they can follow that link and yeah, we'll set that up.
Yep, I'll put that link in the description for people to apply for their free trial. And kids that are watching this, if you think Marty sounds cool and you watch some of the videos, you can always say to your teachers to check out Marty because he has a really cool robot for having in the school. I've used them, really like them. So now that we've covered off who Robotical are and what they do and what your role currently involves, I'd said in the introduction that you have a degree in law. How do you get from doing a degree in law to now being the chief commercial officer of a robotics company?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not like a linear path, and it's kind of been a case of not exactly knowing where it would end up, but having a kind of longer term idea or goal following the degree. I've been very good at learning about things I don't want to do, which I've taken as a steer to kind of guide me into the kind of position that I'm in now. So after studying law for 4 years, realized that it wasn't something that I was finding particularly fulfilling, and the parts of it that I did enjoy were commercially focused, but I still felt like I was on the wrong side of it. So rather than making sure that the companies are compliant and following rules and applying contracts, that sort of thing, I found the actual businesses themselves and case studies and things like that more interesting, more exciting. The kind of change that they were making in the world, and that's particularly true with technology. So coming out of university, I kind of had a rough idea that I wanted to learn more about how businesses work, and I also thought that technology would be um, yeah, the kind of the greatest way to make a big impact. So kind of working for startups, learning about different areas of the business, I figured that would be the best route forward. Didn't start initially in tech though. My first role was selling reusable bags, of all things. So I was yeah, working for a very small company selling reusable bags to the likes of Sainsbury's and National Trust, that sort of thing.
But if I picked you up correctly, although you were starting off in different industries, you were aiming towards and looking towards going into technology.
I think so. I mean, in hindsight, maybe it's actually more the case that came after working for the reusable bag company. I think at that stage it was just a small business that I wanted to work in so that I could learn about lots of different areas. I kind of figured I'd have two choices. I could either go and work for a big company, and that might pigeonhole me into a specific area of the business, like maybe specifically a part of marketing or specifically a part of sales. I thought that by working for a small business, I would get exposed to everything because you usually work in such a small team. You know what everyone does. Sometimes you get asked to help on, a random thing. Maybe it's in like shipping, logistics, maybe something related to their finances or um, the like HR hiring side. So yeah, initially it was just a small business that I wanted to work in to better understand those different roles, in part to figure out which roles I enjoyed, but as well a longer term goal of mine is to run my own business someday. So to get to that point, when an idea hits and I want to run with it, I want to make sure that I have as much kind of in my toolkit as possible to give that a fair chance. So yeah, it's all about learning as much as I can about different parts of the business. So I'm ready for whenever that happens, if it happens.
And obviously, you're now heavily invested in STEM education for the time being. But going further back than your law degree, were you interested in STEM subjects when you were younger?
Yeah, I would say I was always like curious. I think, and that's probably where it starts when it comes to science or STEM is curiosity about how things work or why things are the way that they are. So kind of questioning things. What kind of sticks out from growing up, I was especially interested in history. And I think in part that was because it was at an easier to understand level. I think when you try and understand how things work now, it's very complicated. But if you look at how things worked way back in ancient Rome or even like, I don't know, 200 years ago in like medieval times, it's a bit more tangible. You can kind of see the mechanics of things and how they work. So I'd say I was always curious about that, but more so at an earlier stage in history when things were a little easier to understand. And now I'm curious about how things work that are more complicated, things like Marty. Partly out of necessity, I need to understand kind of how that works, but also out of interest. Yeah.
So historically, there weren't really robotics in schools, when you and I were growing up, that's not really been there. How has the landscape of robotics in education changed, and where do you see it progressing to?
Yeah, that's another good question. And you're right. Yeah, when I grew up, there was nothing robotics related. There wasn't even anything coding related when I was in school either. IT was basically how do you use a PowerPoint, how do you put together a presentation, or how to use Microsoft Word. Whereas now it's encouraging to see that coding and robotics is given more attention in schools. And I wish that was the case when I was growing up. Might have ended up changing the course of my career if it had been. But in terms of the direction that things are going in, um, I think we'll see more technology, more robotics being used in schools. At the moment, they're very much an aid for the teacher to, add excitement and engagement. But I think what we'll probably see more of as well is robotics being used in schools and other organizations to help the people working there do their jobs. Like maybe helping out with it's hard in the context of a school. Not sure exactly how that would work besides it being like an actual teaching assistant, which I think we're very far away from. But yeah, removing kind of manual repetitive tasks that are boring or laborious or dangerous. I think we'll see more robotics being used in those settings.
And you're already getting places that are using, robotic waiters and waitresses. So that's already starting to come in. Do you think this is closing off potential job opportunities for people with the robotics being there? Or do you see it more in a positive way that there's going to be more jobs involving STEM fields to deal with these robotics?
Yeah, that's another really good question. I think if you look back at other kind of revolutions, industrial revolution, etc., I think there were similar fears around that time of people losing jobs. But I think what's happened before and what will probably happen again is that these kind of technological breakthroughs lead to more jobs being created, jobs that don't exist now but will exist in the future. And I'd say I'm more optimistic about that. There are people who worry that we're going to end up working for the robots, but I think that kind of undermines and defeats the whole purpose of using them in the first place. And it would give rise to things like potentially a universal basic income and maybe a change in what we see as work, a shift in what we value as a society as well. I think at the moment we're quite focused on work and what you do for money. And I think it would help change that kind of more capitalist focused kind of agenda.
And you've echoed something there that I say a lot when I do these interviews, and that's that there are STEM fields that exist today that didn't exist when I was young. And likewise, there's STEM jobs that are going to exist in the future that don't exist now that children and young people won't be aware of. So with this continued advancement in robotics, what sort of skills or knowledge do you think children and young people should be developing to be able to become involved in that sort of field?
Yeah, so obviously with STEM, it's kind of, yeah, science, technology, engineering, maths. I think those kind of go without saying that if you're doing well in those areas, there are always going to be opportunities for you. Underneath the skills, though, I think it's important to have that kind of innate curiosity, and yeah, a kind of desire to understand why and how things work, as well as being open to using new tools and technologies to make your life easier. I think if you have that kind of curious approach to whatever you're doing, I think that's probably what sets you up on the path to a good and fulfilling STEM career.
And also for people that are potentially interested in working in robotics, but they have other interests elsewhere, you've obviously come from a completely different direction to come into STEM. So what sort of advice would you give down that front of being able to keep the interest while also exploring other avenues?
Yeah, it's interesting. The people who build technology, and robotics and things like that, you can end up kind of getting used to the way things work and the kind of nuances of the technology. And sometimes when you spend so long working on the product or the technology, you're not spending as much time with the end users or the customers of it. And that can sometimes disconnect you from maybe growing needs in different areas or the realities of how people are engaging with and using it. So I think it's important to have both kind of parts of that in conversations on how you kind of grow a business. So I think, yeah, coming into a technology business as a non-technical person, you help kind of be that customer voice quite often, and help see the kind of changing landscape of how the technology is being used, and yeah, how your customers and users are kind of behaving and engaging if they're needing things now that maybe your product doesn't do anymore or should do. So I think it helps with that kind of enlightening what direction you should be taking.
And as someone that came from outside of STEM, I know you said there was a wee bit of interest when you were younger, but as you've got more involved in STEM, have you come across any STEM heroes or anyone that's inspired you in what you do?
Yeah, I mean, there's been loads, and it goes without saying, STEM with Mr. N is right up there, one of them. Um, and yeah, working in a kind of educational technology company as well, you hear about a lot of kind of famous scientists and computer scientists, roboticists, in that whole process. So people like Alan Turing or Grace Hopper, for example. So there's been, yeah, quite a few kind of influential figures. Yeah, from ones that are known, yeah, quite commonly, and ones that are less known. I think they all, yeah, have a very interesting story and help kind of piece together or answer some of those questions where you're maybe wondering why something is the way it is or how something works.
And I never thought I'd ever hear me getting mentioned in an answer alongside Alan Turing and Grace Hopper. So that's quite incredible to be thrown in there. But another good thing there was out of the two famous people that you'd said in there, Alan Turing and Grace Hopper, we have a female there and it's involved in STEM. And this is something I ask a lot of my guests about with what's going on in their industry. Now, robotics is obviously a lot of engineering and coding, and that's something that I know there's a push to get more females into. What is the landscape like in educational technology in terms of gender, and is it improving with more of a balance?
Yeah, I think the balance is still predominantly male at the moment. I think it's getting better. One of our engineers, our lead engineer, previously was a female, Siobhan, and yeah, before that, I hadn't worked with many engineering teams where there was much female representation. Um, maybe like one or two, but I think the split is still majority male. But I think if you were to go back um, maybe 10, 20 years, there'd be far fewer females. So I think it is getting better. It's still nowhere near an equal split. Um, so I think, yeah, there's still a lot to be done to make sure that it's, a path that is not seen as purely traditionally for men. I think, yeah, there's still work to be done there.
And one of the other things that I've discovered through a lot of research is that um, girls and women tend to not go into the technology and engineering side of things because they can't really see how being an engineer will have a positive impact on people. That it tends to be a more people-based STEM career that they go down, like following down the biological route into doctors and nurses, etc. So how do educational robotics help change and improve the world?
I think, yeah, one of the advantages of educational robotics is, well, particularly for us, we're working at a very young age in sort of primary elementary school level. And at that level, you're kind of early enough that there aren't as many biases or kind of preconceptions of this is for me, this isn't for me. So I think at that stage, there's an opportunity to kind of engage and excite everyone in the subject, regardless of their, gender or kind of stereotypes of, what kind of person has a job in that field. It's more focused on, is this fun? Are you enjoying it? And kind of fostering that interest and engagement.
And getting these skills with robotics, especially at an early age, can really open up a lot of doors in the future because, as Ben has said there in his answers, technology is just going to continue to advance more robotics. So getting involved in these things when you're younger through robots like Marty is a great way to go. So can you tell us what is the future of Marty? I know he's had a few developments over the years. Where's the next step going for Marty?
Yeah, so yeah, as you pointed out there, there's been kind of a few iterations of Marty. We're currently on version 2. And that's part of the whole science thing as well, is, you learn from each kind of iteration and make improvements and kind of improve the product so it does a better job at what you're trying to do. In terms of the future for Marty, it's kind of hard to say, but I think the second version of Marty that we have now will be the last kind of version of Marty that we use in a sort of primary elementary setting. I think if we're to develop another robot, it will likely be addressing something that Marty the robot can't address, and it would look different. I don't think it would be Marty necessarily. I think it might be something else.
Well, that's an exciting note to finish on, hearing that there might be more robotics coming in the future from Robotical. So I'm going to finish up the end of the interview with some clips of Marty in action. But before I do that, Ben, where can people find Robotical online and on social media?
You can find us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at Robotical Ltd. We're on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and all the usual places. You can also visit our website, which is www.robotical.io. And on there, you'll be able to try out some code on our coding platform. You'll be able to look at some of our lessons, join our mailing list if you want to kind of stay in the loop with what's happening and any new developments here at Robotical.
Bye.